The bell tolls at midnight. Greetings. I'd like to welcome all of my midnight marauders. Come on in, get comfy, and lend me your imagination. They say that you can't choose your family, and with that comes all that you inherit from them. For Agasa LeBlanc, that means inheriting powerful abilities that he must learn to master and dark forces that he can never seem to outrun, wanting to take those powers from him. I call this Midnight Tale, Perils of the Dynamic, Part 1, It Found Me. Agasa LeBlanc was crouched down behind the rack of pots and pans in the restaurant, eyes steady and alert. The moonlight showed across the countertops of the gumbo pot eatery, and the floor littered with the day's menu as black, clawed feet heavily glided across pieces of chopped cabbage and carrots. Agasa studied the creature as it growled and sniffed throughout the restaurant. It was at least 7 feet tall with black reptilian skin, a tail with thorny spikes all the way down to the tip, and eyes as black as coal exuding a scent that reeked of sulfur and rotten flesh. A flutter movement of Agasa's head made a low cling of the cookware, and within an instant the beast was in the kitchen foraging around while breathing in huffs out of large slanted nostrils. Agasa was staring at what looked like a dragon, and in a low grumble, the creature called his name, Agasa. Agasa began to feel his gums tearing open as he tried desperately to contain himself. Agasa, the creature again grumbled. The low grumble of the voice was just beyond the pots and pans rack, only a few feet from where Agasa was hiding. The transparency of the beast began to change, and Agasa could barely see it as it began moving in his direction with black eyes and venomous intentions. Agasa sat quietly, then without warning, he was hoisted up from a crouching position and slammed violently on his back. Agasa writhed in pain as this vile creature leaned over him drooling. Its fangs glistened in the moonbeam that showed through the window. It began to inhale the very soul from Agasa's limp body. As the beast inhaled the life from Agasa's body, Agasa's limbs suddenly began to expand and take on a different form, growing in length and diameter. Thick fur covered Agasa's body as he began changing into a dreadful beast with powerful fangs that latched onto the throat of the dragon, tearing a massive hole clean through. Agasa flung the dragon across the room, causing a huge dent in the steel refrigerator and oven. Claw marks carved into the walls as a violent, bloody attack subdued the dragon-like creature that now lay dying on the floor. Agasa's throated roar permeated the entire establishment as his body began to retract and twist as his bones crackled while returning to its human form. He stood, naked and dripping with the blood of the dead creature. The pupils of Agasa's eyes were dilated and emitting ocular flutters while his iris shifted hues. Cautiously and with haste, he stood up and began to recite a chant to make evil disappear that was taught to him by Mama Angel, Louisiana's most beloved voodoo priestess. Suddenly, the air began to change, and the surroundings became like looking at a dark wasteland where a large vortex began to open up around the body of the dragon, drawing it and all of its contents into the black hole. In dynamic fashion, Agasa hastened towards his job locker, grabbed his spare pants and work shirt, and hurried out of the restaurant without locking up, knowing the Dark Ones had found him, and he could never return. Agasa peeked his head outside before hurrying to his car. He noticed a thin man in a dark trench coat smoking a cigarette standing in front of Chico's Deli as he sped off, leaving exhaust smoke in the parking lot. Agasa drove as fast as the speed limit would allow, give or take a few miles per hour, all the while glancing up at the rearview mirror, making sure he wasn't being followed. As he approached a red light, he slowed cautiously and continued to case out his surroundings. He glanced to the right and noticed something odd, the thin man in the dark trench coat standing on the corner, staring at him. Either Agasa's mind and eyes were playing tricks on him, or this the same man who he'd just seen standing in front of Chico's deli 5 minutes ago and 3.5 miles back. The dark one was out hunting him, and he knew if they knew where he worked and where he was headed, then it was possible that they were already at his house and he could not go home. This is what Mama Angel warned him about, and the revelation of this horrifying truth was coming to pass. Mama Angel always told Agasa that in the event that the Dark Ones had found him, he must leave town immediately, taking nothing but the clothes on his back. Once they zero in on your energy, you become a magnet until you cross waters. Agasa kept on driving straight out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, headed for Los Angeles, California, where his late great-grandmother's family resided. That side of his family were known to be some of the most powerful shapeshifters in the entire world. Agasa felt his face become tight with rage, and his eyes turned another color. He slammed his foot down on the gas as he approached the I-10 West, leaving Baton Rouge, Louisiana, furious with the notion of once again having to leave the life he'd grown so accustomed to. His mind traveled back to the days of his childhood, about happier times, with the feeling of peaceful, warm, secure days growing up in the LeBlanc house with his grandmother, who he so fondly called Mama Angel. He drifted back to the very day Mama Angel told him of his birth. It was a humid, rainy night, and the thunder sounded as if mountains were rearranging themselves. The howl of the wind gave the notion that a portal from the great beyond had opened up and sent forth a reckoning of things unknown to man. There was a heavy banging on her door. "Mama Angel, please," a distraught feminine voice yelled. "Oh, dear God, I'm dying. Mama Angel, help me." "Who's there?" responded Mama Angel. "What in God's name is going on?" Mama Angel made it to the door just in time to catch this small-framed, heavily pregnant woman up under her arm before she collapsed. "Oh no, Alebo," Mama Angel said as she guided her to the spare bedroom and gently helped her lay across the bed. Mama Angel turned on the light and almost fainted from the amount of blood on Alebo's pink dress. An agonized Alebo writhed in pain as Mama Angel, who had been a midwife all of her adult life, gave direction to the scared and delirious young woman. "Oh, Mama Angel, please save my baby," said Alebo, who was now barely alert and drifting in and out of consciousness. "Just concentrate, child," said a gentle and uncertain Mama Angel. Mama Angel sat close and directed Alebo to do exactly as she told her, and within the next few minutes, Alebo delivered a beautiful baby boy right into Mama Angel's gentle, awaiting arms. Mama Angel gave a quick but firm slap to the bottom of this quiet baby, and he let out a loud roar, the likes of which she'd never heard in all the years of her service as a midwife. She grabbed a towel and held it underneath the slightly cracked window where a warm stream of summer rain was pounding against the window sill next to where Alebo lay in the guest bedroom. She then gently wiped the tiny face, noticing what looked like cat eyes looking up at her. Mama Angel shook her head, telling herself that all the excitement at her age had her seeing things. She spared no time tending to Alebo, cleaning her up, putting a fresh gown on her and warm linens on the bed, all also making sure Alibo drank water before placing her warm bundle snuggled securely in her arms. "My goodness, child, here's your beautiful baby boy," said Mama Angel as she lay Agasa in Alibo's weak yet ever-awaiting arms. Alibo cuddled Agasa, staring at every little part of him ever so curiously, yet lovingly. She gently kissed his little hands and forehead. Alibo took a deep breath before speaking. "Mama Angel, I must tell you something." "Yes, child, I'm listening," Mama Angel said, smiling, cupping one hand over the other, holding her heart. "One night, on my way from the old conjure woman Stack's place, I met a young man walking down the road, and we struck up a conversation about the smell of the victuals coming from old woman Stack's house, and how absolutely delicious it smelled. He offered me dinner, and ever since that day we'd been inseparable. Until recently," Alibo continued. "He and I had been overjoyed about finding out we were pregnant. But recently, he'd been acting strange, eluding something he called the Dark One." Mama Angel sat still, looking at Alibo, and then down at the tiny bundle of joy she had just assisted in bringing into the world, saying, "Who are these dark ones you speak about, child?" Alibo's eyes began to weaken. Mama Angel repeated the question. "What did you notice, child? Tell me." Just then, Alibo turned to Mama Angel and said, "I noticed that the more my belly grew, the less I saw of him, until last week he left the house and never came back." Mama Angel placed her hand on Alibo's forehead and said, "God doesn't make mistakes, child." Just as Mama Angel began comforting Alibo, she noticed her hand went limp to one side, and her eyes became fixed. Mama Angel stood up over Alibo and gently tapped her shoulder while trying her best to wake her, calling her name, but to no avail. Alibo was gone. A devastated Mama Angel slowly and gently took the baby from her arms, sat down in the chair as the storm raged outside, and wept uncontrollably. She knew Alibo had hemorrhaged while giving birth, causing her passing. Mama Angel thought to herself, "Who is the father of this beautiful baby boy?" Mama Angel vowed to get to the bottom of it, even if it meant seeking the assistance of one of the most powerful conjure women in all of Louisiana. The peculiar happenings surrounding Agasa's birth would be just one of many stories that Mama Angel would tell him growing up in the LeBlanc household, which made it no surprise of the perils he would confront in the coming future. Suddenly, Agasa snapped back into focus and realized he'd been driving for 4.5 hours straight and was exhausted and famished. He would have to stop somewhere to grab a bite to eat and a place to hunker down for the night. He arrived in Houston, Texas at 10:15 p.m. He noticed a small diner still open on the outskirts of town and pulled into the parking lot. He cautiously looked around, making sure he wasn't being followed. He exited the car and hurried into Belle's diner. Agasa had to go to the restroom for at least an hour while on the road. He walked directly to the restroom to relieve his aching bladder. While washing his hands, he looked up at his reflection in the mirror. He noticed the dark rings around his eyes, the large gash above his right cheekbone, and the coarse beard shadow growing in rather thick. "Damn," said Agasa, turning away from his harsh reflection in the mirror, then exiting the bathroom and taking a seat in the far corner of the diner. A short, portly, red-headed waitress approached with a menu and a coffee cup, looking very concerned about Agasa's appearance. She handed him a menu and asked, "Sir, how are you doing this evening?" "I'm fine," Agasa said without eye contact. "What can I get you?" she asked as she poured Agasa a cup of coffee. "I'll have a burger, rare, and fries," he requested. "That's it?" the waitress added. "Yes," said Agasa. Okay, give me about 10 minutes, all right? Agasa sat quietly as he checked out the locals. He noticed a heavy-set police officer staring at him suspiciously from the counter and turned his head not to give him a reason to F with him. He also noticed a blonde woman with red lipstick smeared across her front teeth, which he completely ignored as she continued to smile in his direction. The waitress soon returned with Agasa's food and politely asked, "Is there anything else I can get ya?" "No. Oh, wait. Yes, there is. Where can I find a motel room this late?" he asked. "I'm sort of passing through town and need to catch a few Z's before I'm back on the road tomorrow morning." "Well, there's a Motel 6 directly around the corner on Melbourne Street right before the freeway on-ramp. That way you can stop back by and grab yourself some breakfast before you hop back on the road," the smiling waitress offered. "Thank you kindly, miss." "Katie," the waitress added. "Much appreciated, Katie," said Agasa. Agasa had a powerful appetite and devoured his food in what seemed like seconds. He finished his last sip of coffee, left a $5 tip, and walked towards the door, ignoring the police officer still seated at the counter supposedly reading a newspaper while peering over the top of it to keep his eyes focused on Agasa's every move. He was awkward and sloppy, with a few buttons missing off of his uniform, exposing his enormous belly. The officer turned around in a 360-degree motion to visually follow him out of the door. Agasa paid the officer no mind as he walked out of Belle's diner and calmly looked around his car, even in the back seat, before getting inside, starting the engine and driving off, making sure no one was accompanying him around the corner to the Motel 6 where he would be staying for the night. He parked his car in a dark area of the parking lot so as not to bring attention to it. He entered the motel lobby and rang the bell on the counter for some assistance. An old man with thin gray hair, wearing a gray sweater with a giant hole near one of the front pockets, slowly walked to the counter and asked, "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes, I would like to rent a room for the evening," Agasa responded. "Okay, that will be $75 plus tax. Comes up to $82 even," said the very low-energy night clerk. "Damn, that's kind of pricey for just a few hours," Agasa said under his breath. He paid the night clerk and got the key to room 7 on the ground floor. Agasa cautiously looked around upon exiting the check-in lobby. He walked down the dark walkway, opened the door to his room, clicked on the light, and looked back once again to check out the motel's surroundings. He stepped inside and locked the door immediately behind him. Agasa peered through the blinds, making sure no suspicious-looking person was roaming around outside near his room. Agasa was exhausted and slid the room table in front of the door and sat the TV on top of the table to give himself a few seconds to get position for defense just in case the door was ajar. He set his cell phone alarm for 5 a.m., then laid down for the first time in nearly 2 days. He quickly fell dead asleep. Agasa was startled awake by what sounded like a violent struggle coming from the next room. He jumped up, still fully dressed, shoes and all, and grabbed his cell phone. The phone's clock showed 3:45 a.m. He shoved the phone in his jacket pocket and instantly went into survival mode. Agasa, being a descendant of shapeshifters, possessed the ability to shapeshift into a leopard. He possessed a heightened sense of hearing, smell, sight, and intuition. He could clearly hear a voice in the next room say, "Where is Agasa?" Screams filled the room beside his, and Agasa quickly slid the table and TV away from the door and, with the speed of a leopard, darted out the room and in the direction of his car. Suddenly, from behind, a cold claw gripped his shoulder with such force that it tore straight through his flesh down to the bone. Agasa was thrown to the ground as he looked up and saw the Dark One looming over him, beginning to shed his human disguise as a thorny tail swept across Agasa's face, slicing into his bottom lip and drawing blood that ran into his mouth. "Agasa, we will never go away," shouted the Dark One. "Join us and make it easy on yourself." "Never," Agasa shouted. The Dark One snarled before saying, "Then prepare to die." Agasa motioned to get up, but the Dark One quickly moved on top of him, attempting to inhale Agasa's soul once again. Suddenly, Agasa heard the voice of Mama Angel say, "Agasa, seep into the night." Just then, Agasa's body quivered and he began to change form. The Dark One yelled, "No!" as he felt the sheer strength of Agasa's rage take hold. Agasa began to stretch out a long clawed hand, and the sound of his claws scraping the concrete were grating. His back arched and spread wide with ripples of hard muscle. His face grew narrow with sharp fangs protruding as echoing growls resembling something like a loud, rippling thunder permeated the night. Sleek gold and black fur glistened as yellowish-silver eyes tightened and lowered. Agasa's magic was undeniable, and he quickly began to fade into the black of night and completely disappeared. Agasa found himself invisible, knowing he only had a few minutes before the invisibility spell that Mama Angel had anointed him with would wear off. Agasa moved with precision as he could see the shadowy figure of the Dark One standing still, trying to absorb his magic. Suddenly, people began to exit their rooms, curious as to what all the ruckus was about, only to see the Dark One, disguised as a thin, tall man who was now walking away quickly into the night. Agasa hurried to his car, scoping his surroundings while shaking violently and wincing in pain with a fresh, deep shoulder injury. He opened the car door just as the invisibility spell began to wear off. He got in the car, quickly started the engine, and took off at top speed down the dark road in the opposite direction of the Dark One, but still on the path to Los Angeles, California. Agasa drove for over an hour, knowing he could not sustain the injury that was now causing him to feel lightheaded. He came upon a small gas station with a mature woman working at the counter. Agasa, thinking he'd just stop for a second to buy water, bandage dressings, and some sort of strong pain reliever, slowly staggered inside the mini-mart as a startled, middle-aged, fair-haired woman frighteningly asked, "Sir, are you all right?" Agasa, dizzy and confused, began to speak, saying, "It found me," and suddenly everything went black. Agasa woke up in a strange place and heard scratching on the window next to a small bed, and quickly opened his eyes in a panic, dove onto the floor and rolled underneath the bed, holding his breath. He was sweating profusely, unfamiliar with his surroundings, already suspecting it had found him. He was fully dressed and noticed his duffel bag on a chair in this dimly lit room. He stuffed everything of importance to him, his passport, credit cards, IDs, and a change of clothing with a few non-perishable snacks in his duffel bag. He relished in the fact that he'd gotten used to sleeping fully dressed with his shoes on, just in case he had to get up and run at a moment's notice. Agasa slid out from underneath the bed just as he heard glass breaking and felt the ice-cold sleet from this relentless blizzard blow through the window, landing on the floor, feeling the ice and glass hitting his face. A strong, aggressive Agasa sprang up and grabbed his duffel bag off of the chair while noticing a large, scaly, human-looking reptile creature with its fangs pronounced motioning his way. Agasa darted into the adjoining room, pressing a large elevator button that immediately opened up a heavy steel door as the creature swiped at the quick-moving Agasa, scratching the door as it closed in its face, leaving deep claw marks embedded in the steel. Agasa made it down to the lower level of the house, not knowing where the creature was at this point. He stepped out of the elevator and noticed a high-speed snow bike with the key in the ignition and hopped on it. He turned the key and revved the engine while hitting the garage door button on the wall next to the bike. An escape door to the outside opened and Agasa floored the bike at top speed, just barely missing a catastrophic collision with the creature who immediately took off running behind the bike. The creature was no match for Agasa's will and drive to survive. The Dark One growled loudly with fury in its red eyes, and it flailed wildly as Agasa once again left this hellish nightmare in the dust. Agasa blazed down the highway while the wind whipped the sides of his open jacket like a deflating balloon. His stone-hard expression bore a blank and hollowed-out dark gaze as his eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead of him. "Damn! How the hell did I get way out here in the middle of nowhere?" Agasa yelled into the cold night air. He drove into the dead of night, feeling the dressing on his sore shoulder, thinking of a way to stay alive until he reached his loved ones in the so-called City of Angels.